On behalf of this Department of Ancient Indian History, Culture and Archaeology, Visva-Bharati, I welcome you all for this 10th lecture in the series of Professor B.D. Chattopadhyaya Memorial Lecture. As is announced earlier, today's speaker is Professor Suchandra Ghosh. As per the tradition of this Visva-Bharati and its lecture series, first we pay floral tributes to Professor B.D. Chattopadhyaya and traditionally welcome our guests. After that, we'll have this academic session. So please, Ashok, please, we'll start with this floral tribute to Professor B.D.C. So I request Professor Ashok Das, then Professor Nutu Das Gupta. Dr. Sayantani Pal, Madam, I welcome you all and request you to Dr. Peter, two of our Calcutta guests from Calcutta University and Professor Das Gupta from Calcutta. For this lecture. So now I request my colleague Dr. Sarita Khetri to welcome Professor Das Gupta this occasion, and Professor Das Gupta is chairing this session.
This comes as a surprise.
This is great honor for all of us.
Great honor for me.
That you people are here and Professor Ashok Das is here. Cheers. Now, Dr. Savarni, I request you to welcome Professor Suchandra. So now I request Dr. Savarni Pramani Nayak, our colleague, to formally welcome Professor Ghosh, and after that, the stage will be yours.
Good afternoon. So welcome you all on behalf of the Department of Ancient Indian History, Culture and Archaeology, Visva-Bharati. Today we have among us Dr. Suchandra Ghosh, who will deliver the 10th lecture of the BDC Memorial Lecture Series. Professor Suchandra Ghosh doesn't need an introduction. She presently is teaching in the Department of History, University of Hyderabad. She specializes in early Indian history with a focus on epigraphy and numismatics. She broadly takes interest in politico-cultural history of Northwest India, early India's linkages with early Southeast Asia, Indian Ocean Buddhist and trade network, and history of everyday life. Before joining University of Hyderabad, she was professor in the Department of Ancient Indian History and Culture, University of Calcutta. She is also the area editor of the Encyclopedia of Ancient History, Asia and Africa. Some of our major publications are Exploring Connectivity, Southeastern Bengal and Beyond, published from the Institute of Social and Cultural Studies at Kolkata in 2015. From the Oxus to the Indus, a political and cultural study, circa 300 BCE to circa 100 BCE, published by the Primus Books in 2017. She has also edited a large number of books jointly with some other scholars, such as Issues in Agrarian History of India, Essays in Memory of Professor B.C. Sarkar, jointly with B.D. Chattopadhyaya and Vishnupriya Gosal. Subversive Sovereigns Across the Seas, the Indian Ocean Port City Experience, jointly with Kenneth Hall and Rila Mukherjee. Early Indian History and Beyond. This is in honor of Professor B.D. Chattopadhyaya, together with Osman A.I.H.C. Cross-cultural networking in the Indian Ocean realm, circa 100 to 1800 CE. In 2019, jointly with Kenneth Hall and Kaushik Gangotpadyay and Rila Mukherjee. So there are other books she has, in which she has many articles and chapters in journals. She has also some other edited volumes and books of national and international review. So today, the title of her presentation is Locating the Indo-Iranian Borderlands Between Central Asia and South Asia, a reading of the past connected history from 3rd century BCE to 6th century CE. So may I request now Professor Ghosh to deliver her presentation. The stage is yours. Please.
At the outset, I must say that I am deeply humbled by the invitation to speak in memory of a savant, Professor B.D. Chattopadhyay, who was BDC to us. I offer my sincere gratitude to all the faculty members of the Department of Ancient Indian History, Culture and Archaeology of the Visva-Bharati Shantiniketan and the head of the department, Professor Anil Kumar, to considering me worthy of this. As you all know, there have been 9 other professors who have delivered this lecture. I am also very happy, honored and privileged to have with us today Professor Ashok Das, who has come after his wonderful, inspiring visit to London to receive the D.Litt from the University of London and has come here to bless me and all of us and to meet all of us. So thank you so much, sir, for being here with me and with BDC. As we all know that he was also a very good friend of Professor Brajadulal Chattopadhyay. Professor Nupur Dasgupta came all the way from Jadavpur, University from Kolkata, and I'm thankful to her. My colleagues from Calcutta, from my alma mater, Shantoni and Rita, are here. And there are many other colleagues, friends, students from this university and others. So I'm deeply humbled and I'm very happy and glad that we have among the audience also people who are interested in the region. So I will be very grateful to have some feedbacks from them maybe later. 1 year and 15 days have passed by, but his words and memories are of yesterdays and todays. I've chosen Indo-Iranian borderlands as the region for my discussion to pay homage to Professor Brajadulal Chattopadhyay. There is a reason, because as I began to drift towards Southeast Asia, he reminded me that I should not give up my interest in Northwest India, which I inherited from my mentor, Professor B.N. Mukherjee, who is also sorely missed today. He taught us, Professor B.D. Chattopadhyay taught us to question the general tendency to look at a region as a permanently homogeneous entity, not accommodating variations and mutations. Keeping this in mind, today I will try to focus on an area which was a space of hybrid interactions. He brilliantly combined the multiple roles of a remarkable teacher, researcher, colleague, mentor, and a friend in his persona. This is a very tall order, and I know I cannot reach that. By this, let me begin my presentation, which, as you have heard, I have named it Locating in the Iranian Borderlands Between Central Asia, South Asia, a reading of the past connected history, 3rd century BC to 6th century CE. History of a region cannot be seen in isolation. A region is usually considered as a part of a whole. The whole is generally taken to be a nation state. However, the presence of a nation state cannot be pushed back to the period under discussion. So the identity and formation of a region has to be studied from its historical geographical situation and its locational character. In the context of Asia, among the important zones with distinct identity, we have Central Asia, which is largely a steppe area, having East Asia with a settled society in the eastern flank, and West Asia under a very long sedentary society, and then South Asia, which is a subcontinent largely sedentary, whereas elements of non-sedentary culture with forest and pastoral groups are present. South Asia is distinct from West and Central Asia, but linked to them with a blend zone, which is the Indo-Iranian borderland. So you can see the location of Central Asia, which is very important. Indo-Iranian borderlands, we can extending from Afghanistan to northwest India from a long time, formed the focal point for travelers, monks, merchants, and political personalities. In cultural terms, this area is a confluence for ancient trade routes, extending westward through the Iranian plateau to Mesopotamia and the Mediterranean, northeastward through Central Asia to China, and southeastward into the subcontinent. A synthesis of the archaeological materials found at these sites indicates multi-pronged linkages, of which the Central Asian connection played a significant role in the shaping up of the culture of the region. In cultural terms, this area is a confluence for ancient trade routes, extending westward through the Indo-Iranian plateau to Mesopotamia and the Mediterranean, northeastward through Central Asia to China, and southeastward into the Indian subcontinent. As it was a blend zone, a conduit through which men traveled, carrying with them merchandise, fables, stories, ideas, knowledge, and the likes, which fostered hybridity. Geographically, the region can be divided into two distinct zones along the natural barrier of the Hindu Kush, the most significant of Afghanistan's mountain chains. Now, when we look at this, we find that the zone to the north of the Hindu Kush corresponds to Bactria and Sogdiana, while that to the south corresponds to Arakosia, Parapanissadai, and Gandhara. Intervention of Central Asian powers paved the way for closer linkages between the two regions. B. N. Mukherjee aptly demonstrated how Indian scripts, languages, and religious elements percolated into various Central Asian documents in his book in early Central India, in early Central Asia. The movements continued in different phases, and Central Asian intervention in the political domain, among others, gained ground. At this juncture, one has to mention Iran as the political culture of the Achaemenid Empire extended to the Indo-Iranian borderlands. The so-called Persepolis fortification texts, published by Richard Hallock, are classic examples of long-distance travel in the Achaemenid Empire. Just a few lines about these texts. These are particularly, there are a lot of these texts, but they talk of different kinds of elements that were being taken, and one of them is the travel rations. So we get a very good idea that what are the things that were being transported and where are these going. So these travel rations, these tablets give us an idea of the empire, the extent of the empire of Darius. So these are very important for understanding the geographical extent too. Though the Achaemenid interlude in the northwest was short, there are some evidences of cross-cultural interactions. In the post-Achaemenid period too, political, economic, and cultural contacts continued, particularly during the reigns of the Kushanas and the Sassanids. Intervention led to interaction, which involved the diffusion of technology, artifacts, culture, and religion, among others. This was a blend zone which fostered hybridity, which could be taken as a pronounced third space, Homi J. Bhabha's conception. The first being Central Asia and Iran, and the second space is South Asia. Though this concept of the third space by Bhabha is located in the context of colonial and post-colonial period, it is possible to articulate in the context of the Indo-Iranian borderlands, where understanding the mutuality of culture in expressions of syncretic ideas and transculturation is possible. It was an in-between space, within quotes, marked by hybridity. The cultural objects retrieved from the archaeological sites demonstrate that here there was no attempt to iron out, dehistoricize, and delocate cultures from their temporal, spatial, and geographical aspect. Thus here, an Indo-Greek king like Agathocles, you all are aware of this coin, but I thought of bringing this as an example here, would easily issue a coin with the device of Shankarsana and Vasudeva in Greek Prakrit language, while the bilingual coins of his near contemporaries stuck to depicting Greek deities. This was the conduit through which people traveled, carrying with them merchandise, fables, stories, ideas, knowledge, and the likes. The important areas of the Indo-Iranian borderlands were Bactria, Gandhara, and Kandahar. Cyrus or Kurush is credited with victories over Bakhtresh, Bactria, and the Shakals, marking hereby the first Achaemenid push towards the east from Iran. Political situations and events gained greater clarity with the advent of Darius, that is Darius, the greatest ruler, who ruled from 522 to 486 BC of the family. With him begins the practice and tradition of epigraphic recording of royal events, of course in a highly eulogistic manner, to glorify and leave a strong impression of the enormous power of the Achaemenid monarchy. Of the 23 countries, localities, peoples subjugated by him under his firm authority were Gandhara, Ghosh, again then we have reference to Hidush. So what is important is that nothing is circumscribed here. And so Gandhara was the ideal space where an independent art form flowered, which was not circumscribed by the art of any single culture. In the domain of epigraphy, a striking example is the Stele of Sophitos, a funerary epigram written in Greek, recovered from Gandhara. I'm thankful to Professor Paul Bernard, who had very kindly sent me also the translation of this inscription of Sophitos. Now, here we find it. There is an interesting example where the author and his father bear Indian names, Sophitos, Subhuti, and Naradas, Narada, respectively. And this was published by Paul Bernard, Pinot, and Rushma. On the basis of paleography and comparison with other Greek inscriptions from Ai-Khanum, the authors prefer to date it around the 2nd century BCE. It is written in pure Greek and is suggestive of the kind of Hellenization that pervaded Central Asia in the post-Alexandrian period. Sophitos is said to have cultivated the arts of Apollo and Muses, become a merchant, amassed great wealth, and came back in and rebuilt his home with much grandeur. His was a thoroughly Hellenized Indic family who made ancient Arachosia their home. There are many such worthy narratives of cross-cultural connection, and the major agency could be movement of people. It is not desirable to identify one category of people, and so monks, merchants, artisans, musicians, etc. could be responsible for exchange of ideas. Having said that, we must admit that the most persuasive agency could be trade. Trade as a cross-cultural activity and traders as purveyors of culture had immense potential for rich cultural mediation. With these examples of connections as a backdrop, I want to move forward in our discussion with a statement by Luca M. Olivieri. The statement concerns the impact of the political presence of the Indo-Greeks in Gandhara and northwestern India. Olivieri opines, I quote him, "I'm inclined to Indo-Greek rule along the major economic corridors of ancient India, along the axis of the major rivers, the Kabul, Indus, and the rivers of Punjab, was a major one and an international one with a crucial local component," unquote. I cannot but agree with him. It's very right. The element of local component is in Gandhara and like Taxila, Charsada, and Kandahar have attracted the attention of scholars and students of South Asia. But the striking site of Barikot have escaped their attention. Sites in at least like we have Barikot means Bilkot Kundai is located in the Swat Valley. You can see the picture. This site was excavated by the Italian mission. Tucci identified Barikot with the ancient city of Bazira, which was conquered by Alexander during the last phase of his campaign. Drawing largely from the works of P. Cagliari and Luca M. Olivieri, I want to underscore the importance of this site in the context of the presence of multilingual community. This is evident from the pottery assemblage unearthed from Barikot. Iranic pottery are represented mostly by open forms, serving vessels, and tableware. I'm sorry, I did not get a good picture of this pottery collection. And then we have cooking pots, containers, mostly closed forms. And then, of course, in this whole collection, the influence of the Hellenistic tradition could be perceived from the Indo-Greek period. Along with the potteries of the Ganga Valley, several new types also appear here. Small corpus of Greek and Brahmi inscriptions on shirts, along with one shirt with the painted Aramaic letters, were unearthed from the Indo-Greek acculturation phase. The Greek inscriptions are confined to Hellenistic ware and Brahmi to Indic wares. Olivieri looks at this distinction as a dichotomy and reflection of social and ethnic stratification. I do not see a dichotomy here, though the presence of social and ethnic segregation would be there. It is in the logic of things that the Indic wares would have inscriptions in Brahmi, as the wares were being made by the people, Indians, writing Brahmi. It may be noted that generally the local people of Barikot would be writing in Kharoshti, which was the script of northwestern India. But here, these inscriptions are in Brahmi. During the heydays of Barikot, there was an increasing connectivity between Ganga Valley and the Northwest. There is thus a possibility that potters or artisans could have come from the Ganga Valley, where Brahmi was the predominant script, and settled in Barikot. Similarly, the Greek tableware would be produced by people who had an understanding of Greek pottery as well as knowledge of the Greek script. For example, the influence of Megarian bowls is very well known in the context of the local molded ware. So through the agency of artisans, Bactria influenced the local molded ware of Barikot. The best part is that there was no attempt at homogenization. You will have realized that by this, I'm trying to bring in different kinds of examples, maybe disparate from different areas of Indo-Indian borderlands, but to put forward my argument of the kind of hybridity and or heterogeneity that we see in the space, which I call as third space, the Indo-Iranian borderlands. So here, what we like to show that the study of the ceramic assemblage allows us to appreciate the presence of a multilingual community at Barikot, the Swat Valley. This idea of multilingual community can be traced back to the days of the Achaemenids, when Darius first issued the Bestun or Bestun inscription, Persian, Elamite, and Babylonian. This is the marker of an empire with people speaking different tongue, and it is recognized by the emperor. One can also break in this context the bilingual edicts of Ashoka and the Shinogor inscription of the Kushana period, all related to a vast empire. Now, not far from Barikot, at a present distance of 2.5 hours, is Buner. Sorry, I wanted to show this, the bilingual, the trilingual inscriptions. This is the Bestun inscription. A stair-riser relief housed in the Cleveland Art Museum shows Scythian soldiers dancing to music. The instruments are a small harp, a hand drum, and a small portable xylophone. 3 of the men are dancing, clasping both hands together. The headgear closely resembles a Phrygian cap. There are other reliefs also from Buner depicting people in Greek dress, like the short tunic or chiton, and the enveloping himatan for women or exomish for men. This relief can be dated to a later period than Barikot, when the Scythians took over the region from the Indo-Greeks, so around 1st century BCE. What is remarkable in this relief is the portrayal of the embeddedness of Greek culture, while the ethnicity of the soldiers is not lost sight of. This is the advantage of visual descriptions, where we can actually see the representation, the ethnic and the otherwise. But regarding the ethnic identity of a person, a question that arises is, how do we understand the ethnicity of a person from an epigraphic record? A common answer would be through the name of that person. Was it always possible? Perhaps not, as Stephen Bombs gives us a telltale example about Menandros, a scion of the well-known royal family of Opracha in Bajaur. This is the Bajaur area. this family was ruling around 1st century BC to 1st century CE. The name Menandros is given after, of course, the famous ruler Menander. Half of his relatives have adopted Indian names like Subhutika, Vijayamitra, Indrasena, and other half retained their foreign names, Scythians and others, Satruleka, Davili, etc. Therefore, it is nearly impossible to judge the ethnicity of this ruling family. Bombs rightly comments, I quote him, "We can make no more than guesses about the amount of Hellenism entering into the complex and the eclectic cultural makeup of these foreign rulers of the Indian Northwest that chose to bestow Greek names on some of their offsprings," unquote. With this, I'd like to add a set of Kharoshti manuscripts written in Gandhari, which was discovered from Bajaur again. A striking find in our context of interaction is a Niti Arthashastra type of text written in Kharoshti. Ingo Strauss's study reveals that the text describes the part of the state, the importance of alliances, the character of ministers and allies, the meaning of the royal treasure, and so on, as in the Arthashastra. This Gandhari text is a special exemplar in the sense that here no Brahmanical priest is mentioned, nor there is any reference to Varna. For Strauch, this text was representing a neutral, non-religious political science which was shaped for an environment where explicit Brahmanical or Buddhist values had to be avoided in political practice. The presence of a text like Arthashastra in the collection of Buddhist manuscripts conjures a few questions for us. What is the purpose of writing such a text? Who were the intended readers? The association of the sutras of this text with the Arthashastra reveals a thorough knowledge of the text, which was mutated according to their own idea of polity. Was there a patron who commissioned the writer of this text? At the present state, we have no clue. Absence of Varna ideology makes it very important. That shows that here in the Northwest, we did not have the context of Varna that was specially designed, and this text was specially designed for Northwest India, where the dominant ethnic groups were outside the Varna Jati system, and so hence beyond the class of a Purahita or a priest. Now I will shift my gaze to Sogdiana, moving a little forward in time and space and focus on the paintings of Penjikant. Penjikant, to the east of Samarkand, was a small city predominantly of merchants. More than 50 rooms with wall paintings have been excavated in Penjikant. The paintings of Penjikant are datable according to archaeological strata. Thus, the long narrative appears here from 700 to 740 CE. The paintings were divided into 3 registers by the excavator Boris Marshall. On the lower register, there were rectangular panels with illustrations of fables and fairy tales, couples and musicians. We have stories from a book of political science couched in the form of animal fables, the Panchatantra, painted on these walls. The stories were composed by a Brahmana named Vishnu Sharma, perhaps in the 3rd century CE. Now, this is one of the most accepted dates. There are different dates, of course, but this is the most accepted. And recently, Upinder Singh and Kumkum Roy, both of them have written on Panchatantra, and they have used these dates. So I've drawn from them. Now, Panchatantra has captured the imagination of the people in many parts of the world. The westward migration of Panchatantra began with the translation of the Sanskrit text into Pahlavi by order of the Persian king Khusru Anushirvan, and that happened in 550 CE. And the Sanskrit original is said to be, as I said, that 3rd century CE. Now, among the stories that were represented from Panchatantra were the tale of the lion and the hare, where the clever hare fooled the stupid lion. Then there is the description of the tale of the bull, the lion, and the jackal. The picture illustrates the first book of the Panchatantra on how to destroy alliances between greater powers. And that has been very interestingly described by Monica Zinn also in one of her articles on Panchatantra. Now, another important depiction was the tale of the resurrected tiger. So you can see here this tale. This is here, the quality is not very good. So what we find is that it was illustrated twice. once in a medallion and second in a rectangular painting. Now, in the depiction, there are 3 wise men, though if you look at the Panchatantra story, there are 4 wise men. And then it is not the tiger, but the lion. But it has a similar kind of story in the Sanjiva Jataka, number 150, where it is a tiger who was resurrected by a Brahmana. Now, this brief review of the depiction of the Panchatantra stories in the paintings of Panchikant indicates that these are not direct translations or transmission of the original stories in art, but are results of mutation with different narratives. Thus, in this case of the resurrection of the tiger, the lion of the Panchatantra story was replaced by the tiger from the Sanjika Jataka, while keeping the format more or less same. So more importantly, it brings to light that it was not just the Panchatantra which was circulating in middle of Asia before 740 CE, but a huge body of mostly Indian tales in versions which are more similar to the ones known from other collections. So here there was a mixture of the Jataka story and the story of the Panchatantra, and then it got a different kind of shape. Now again the question is, what was the agency that helped in the circulation of these fables and stories from India to Sogdia? We can think here of the Sogdian traders who could have been responsible for the circulation of stories. We can think of the Sogdian trade, Sogdiana was an important cultural center also, and the Sogdian merchants network made possible the circulation of people, product, and ideas. Etienne de Lavoisier had written long time ago on the Sogdian merchants in French, and then it has been translated in English too. The prehistory of this network can be traced to the Kushan period, when we perceive the unification of South Central Asia and Northern India. Though the first reference to the Sogdians come via the Achaemenids, and here I would just like to show the Egyptian statue of Darius, which carries inscriptions in hieroglyphic script and listing 24 subjects. And there in this list, we have the Hidush, the Sogat, and the Harwadi and Haravatish, that is Arakoshi. The Indo-Iranian borderlands transformed into a strong economic corridor through which merchants and merchandise could travel to the Silk Road on the one hand, on the other hand, reach the ports of Barbarikon and Barugaza for further transshipment across the Persian Gulf or the Red Sea. Sogdians became apprentices of the Kushan merchants and finally rose to the position of independent merchants themselves. Many of the merchants emigrated as far as northwestern India. We learn from the biography of Kang Senghui that his ancestors were people originally from Kangzhou, which is Sogdiana, who had lived in Tianzhu, that is India, for several generations. His biography also mentions the presence of other Sogdian merchant families in India during the 2nd century CE. An indicator of the predominance of the Sogdians in the traffic and trade across this region is the fact that Sogdian became the lingua franca of commerce. The Sogdians had adopted the imperial Aramaic script of Achaemenid official, commercial, and literary correspondence and continued to use it in various forms in successive centuries and locations. We had the story of, in the Hohanshu, the story of Kangtai, who had brought horses from Fargana. B.N. Mukherjee used to give us the story in our classes. From Fargana, the blood sweating horses were brought from Northwest India to the ports of Tamralipta, and from Tamralipta, it was going to the country of the Udi country of Funan. Now, this whole narrative, it was generally believed that Kangtai was a Chinese. But with the knowledge that Kang was a term used for the Sogdian merchants by the Chinese, now it is very clear that this Kangtai was actually a Sogdian merchant. And when we collaborate it with the letters, and when we have these names like Kang Senghui, we can very easily understand that this Kangtai was a Sogdian merchant traveling during the Chinese Han Dynasty period. Now, this the Sogdians, when we look at this, the sources, we find that a range of written and visual texts attest to both the ubiquity of the Sogdian language along the Central Asian trade routes and the extensive relocation of the Sogdians themselves. The sources generally use the study of these merchants, apart from the Caravaneer graffiti in the passes of the Upper Indus, are a unique collection of documents, the Sogdian ancient letters, which proved the existence of a Sogdian commercial network connecting the Chinese capitals Gansu, the southern Tarim Basin, and Samarkand at the beginning of the 4th century CE. The credit goes to Sir Orenstein, who had actually discovered these ancient letters of Sogdian traders in 907 from a watchtower in Central Asia. These letters were found together, but they came from different places. The first and the third letters were written by the same person at Dunhuang. So these are the nature of the letters, if you can see. So were persons at Dunhuang and were probably destined for lowland. The second letter was bound for Samarkand and was composed in the Gansu corridor. So this map actually shows you the different areas where the merchants, this is the places which are referred to in the ancient letters. And then we have the fifth letter, which are sent from Wuvi in Gansu. So here we have the region of, the region of Wuvi, and this is the corridor and the Taklamakan desert. And so these whole areas were at that point of time dominated by the Sogdian merchants. So these letters also revealed the existence of Sogdian mercantile guilds in China and in Central Asian settlements linking India and China. Nicholas Sims Williams has translated many of the letters. Now, in order to posit India in the commercial network of the Sogdian merchants, which extended to China, the letters are of much significance. The commodities of exchange are cited in 4 of these letters. The merchandise mentioned in the ancient letters is quite varied and consists of a significant number of luxury goods. These letters were addressed to people far away. Many of these commodities and related words indicate Indic association. As observed by Etienne de la Vassière, whom I mentioned, he says that ancient letters 4 and 5 lend themselves to an analysis of the local balance of east-west exchange in Gansu. From the west came silver and gold, while pepper, silver, wine, rice, and white-lead powder were ready to be sent to the west. It is said in the letter that in Guzang, there are 4 bundles of white lead for dispatch and 2,500 measures of pepper for dispatch, and the double prastaka, which is an Indian unit of measure, and 5, and then we have reference to a half stater of silver. I'm not going into the details of this, but what is important is that the presence of paper in Gansu to be sent to the Western countries indicate a long-distance network and interconnection between the coastal route of the western coast of India with the land route, which finally connects to the Silk Route. Paper was grown in large quantities in Malabar. This commodity could have traveled in a coastal watercraft like Pravahana, which was shown by Ramnavir Chakravarti that we have different types of names of the vessels. But when we talk of Pravahana, it is actually a coastal vessel that was in practice. So through this Pravahana, it was traveling from the port of Muziris and reached the port of Barugaza or Bharukacha, from where it could take a land route to the northwest. Moreover, connection with India is also suggested by several Indian loan words entering into the Sogdian letters. So here I can, I've given this from Etienne de la Vassière and Samar News. Also, like Sartha from Sanskrit Sartha, Caravan, Satra from Sanskrit Sarthavaha. I'm not reading all this for lack of time. Then we have Mulya, the Modi Mulya. So these kind of connections attest the kind of connections that are attested by these loan words are very important. Then we have this word called Sabao, which means perhaps a Sogdian caravan leader, and we could think that it has come from the Sanskrit Sartavaha, leader of the merchants. So the significance of these loan words cannot be underestimated. The question is, what was the source of contact? We learned that Chatyal in the Upper Indus was a place where maximum concentration of Sogdian merchants have been found. So this is the Karakoram highway route where we have the different petroglyphs, and Sogdian petroglyphs like this has been found in the inscriptions in the Karakoram highway. But here I will talk about a particular place, and that is Chatyal, where we have a very strong concentration of Sogdian merchants. Now the question is, why do we have such a concentration? And the clue, perhaps, I feel, can be had from the only longish inscription found there. It says, Narai Bandak, son of Narisaf, have come here on the 10th day and asked a boon from the spirit of the sacred place of Kittat. Then there are some things which are not translated. Then it says, I may arrive at Tashkurgan. So this is a desire, a wish that I may arrive at Kashkurgan more quickly and see my brother in good health and joy. So this was a sacred place where they were coming for some kind of worship and some kind of receiving some kind of boon. So two things emerge from this. First, and the sacral character of, this is the road to India. You can see the location of Shatiyal, and this is the famous petroglyph that has been found from Shatiyal. I think it's not shown, it's Curse Jason Lilies. Now, the two things that I feel comes out from this, one is that it indicates the presence of Sogdians in Tashkurgan, which was an important trading center along the Silk Road. And the sacred character of Shatiyal could be understood from this beautiful, elaborate representation of a stupa in one of the boulders. By stretch of imagination, can we think that this sacred character of the area attracted Buddhist merchants from northwest as well? As a result, there could be regular interaction resulting in borrowing of words in each other's vocabulary. Iranian names written in Brahmi characters point to the knowledge of Brahmi script by these people. The Sogdians were engaged in trade both between India and Sogdiana, and in that between India and China. So this could be a place where we can see this kind of transformation. But it is interesting to note that Indian texts are not very vocal about the Sogdians. The identification of the Sogdians in classical Indian texts was made decades ago in 1910. R. Gauthier showed that the Chuliko of the Markandeya Purana and the Matsya Purana, whose country was crossed by the Chakshu, that is the Vakshu, that is the officers, were the Sogdians. These texts do not indeed mention the Sogdians per se, the Chulika, but never in a commercial context. But to take a very representative example from the Mahabharata, it refers to the Chulika while describing the army of the array of army in the war. So this reference to the Sogdians, Chulika in the army of the Kurus at the time of the great battle with the Pandavas associated with the Greeks, the Yavanas and the Shakas, and mentioned after the Bahalikas. The place when it is mentioned is also very important. And the Cambodia thus fits within the framework of a complete list of all the peoples known to the Indians who lived to the northwest of India, a list which corresponds to what we know of the political context of the 2nd century or 1st century BCE. Incidentally, the Khotanis referred to the Sogdians as Suli, and later on it became a generic term for all merchants. The linguistic similarity between Suli and Chilika cannot be overlooked. Did the Khotanis then borrow Suli from Chilika? We don't know, perhaps. They could have used also here the Jibin route, the route from where which was a direct route coming from Central Asia to Kashmir. And that was a shorter route, but most difficult route. Now, from this overview, it can be surmised that in addition to intervention of the Central Asian powers in the Northwest India and further east, interlocking merchant network formed the core of the Central Asia-South Asia interface with multiple nodes and routes. Achaemenids were introducing the Central Asian entities through the epigraphs. The merchant network extended towards west coast of India too, which was dotted with many ports like Barugaza, Kalyan, Sopara, and Chaul. It is possible that Central Asian merchants visited these ports for different kinds of merchandise like semi-precious stones, spices, and the like. Muziris, the premium port of Malabar and prime supplier of pepper, was directly linked with the above ports of Konkan and Gujarat. The Sogdian merchant letters mention pepper as a very important trading commodity. So it is possible that Sogdian traders themselves were operating in this route. This perhaps explains the depiction of Sogdians in a painting from Cave 17 of Ajanta, Descent from Heaven Sea. Their headdress identify them as Sogdians. Schlingroff has done a long time back, but there are some other observations also. The depiction is so real that it appears that the painters are well versed with the presence in Western Deccan. There is a portrait of other foreigners in Ajanta too, who dress like the Shakas or the Kashanas or the Central Asians and are often shown with Phrygian caps as a part of a banquet scene common in Central Asia. In the light of the recent researches, and here you can see that the type of cap that was been worn by people, in some people in the paintings of Ajanta. In the light of a recent researchers like by Matteo Camperati argues that the evidence seems to point at the 5th century Bactria to Kharistan as the place of origin of most of the non-Indic decorations that appear in the paintings at Ajanta. From the earlier times, the interregional significance of Tukharistan was based on its position of the Hindu Kush passes. Tukharistan is ancient Bactria. This was the region, and we know the importance of Bactria in the network of in the Iranian borderlands. So the Bactrian plains were connected with the steppes of Central Asia, with the Kabul Valley and beyond, and then also further south. Now, while concluding, I would like to say that whatever I have mentioned, so what comes to the fore from the brief discussion above is that the Indo-Iranian borderlands during the period of our discussion could be taken as a space of hybrid interactions between people of varied culture. Movement and migration through this space enabled transregional cultural dialogue. I have attempted to foreground this conversation between Central Asia and South Asia, locating in the Iranian borderlands as an intermediate position through the lens of epigraphy, texts, letters, paintings, and examples from material culture, thus bringing in the tangible and the intangible domain in close contact, where the human agency played a significant role. I feel that we cannot do any historical exercise without thinking about the human agency. A sense of the new was created here. And in this context, I have tried to explore Homi Bhabha's idea of third space, where meanings and symbols of culture had no, if I quote him, had no primordial unity or fixity, unquote. For a period which was, of course, we all know that he was talking of the colonized and the colonizers. So he was talking of the colonial and the post-colonial period. But I'm trying to bring this idea of this third space into a very early period and which was far removed in time. A close encounter with the history of the borderlands would reveal that it cannot be seen as a homogeneous spatial unit or cannot be identified having a homogeneous national culture. Nor was it a melting pot, as W.J. Vogelson once said, and I quote him, there is the area between the North Afghanistan and the Indian subcontinent, here in the valleys of the mountains of Badakhshan, Tukharistan, Dardistan, and ancient Gandhara, the cultural orbits of India, the Iranian plateau, and the deserts and steppes of Central Asia meet into a true melting pot of peoples and cultures, unquote. I don't agree to the view of a melting pot. Rather, this was a region which entertained differences and retained its vigor, navigating through multiple cultures. This is a picture of the Sogdian merchants belonging to the later period of the Tang. This is from the Tang dynasty records. At the end, I would like to thank Professor Osman Bapirici is here, and I would like to thank him for all his support during my work on the Northwest. And it goes without saying, without the vast library of B.N. Mukherjee, it wouldn't have been possible. And finally, I thank Professor Ranabir Chakrabarti for some very interesting discussions that I had with him, and that idea that we should not forget the Achaemenids in this whole story, he actually implanted in me. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Ghosh, for your illuminating, enlightening, your inspiring talk. As usual, uh, you are always, while speaking, while delivering lectures, and I have nothing to say about your scholarship, and particularly on this region, very few, we all are aware that very few people are working on this region nowadays. Yeah, it was great experience to have this lecture. Now, I think I request the chair, Professor Nupur Das Gupta, ma'am, to take over the stage and do the further proceedings. Also, I will request Professor Ashok Das, sir. I'm fortunate that we all are fortunate that he is with us today for this talk. So I will request him also for a couple of words. First, Nupur, please come.
Uh, Thank you, Anil. This is a great opportunity, and I'm really very grateful for uh, being invited to chair this wonderful session, especially since this is in memory of Professor P.D. Chattopadhyaya, someone all of us really, really respected and who had set us thinking on different ways and had illuminated the path of history, especially ancient Indian history, in a very different light from what it was before. And today, I think my friend, and I should call her younger sister, Professor Suchandra Ghosh, who has done a real justice to his memory by ably linking up his ideas about how a region should be looked at and looking at the history, the evolution of regions, evolution of spatial history, which is a wonderful, he wrote wonderfully about that in his Bharatvarsh and other essays in that volume. And this is a real rejoinder to that, I think. And now I think that the talk is open for discussions. Should there be questions and answers, or should there be comments and something? And I now invite Professor Ashok Das, if you would like to say a few words, and any of our colleagues, students, scholars here. Yeah. So Professor Dash, please come to the dais and say a few words.
I'm thankful to Anil Kumar and, of course, Suchandra for bringing me here. I mean, people have forgotten that I originally belong to the domain of ancient Indian history and culture. My post-graduation was on that particular subject, and the names she mentioned are, all my colleagues and friends. I especially feel a bit sad that I am here, for a lecture in memory of Brajadulal Chattopadhyaya, who was younger to me. He, of course, as you all know, was a scholar of greatest ability. And Suchandra also mentioned Professor Bhatin Mukherjee, who was a great mentor to a whole range of students in the Department of Ancient Indian History and Culture. Because we tend to forget our close relationship with the Northwest. And normally our textbooks do not mention much. The places that Professor Suchandra Ghosh mentioned, all brought to my mind the classroom lectures of a great teacher we had, Professor D. Mukherjee. He was the one who used to teach in our time. And it was also Professor Mukherjee also learned a lot from him, Durga Mohan Mukherjee. He actually told us about, in those days that was a kind of Aryan problem, coming, the great migration that took place, and all other details which happened prior to what Suchandra has spoken about in this evening's lecture. But also there are 2 points that came to my mind. One is Sogdiana, and we know so little about it. Our textbooks actually tell nothing about that. But as Suchandra has pointed out, how close our trade and cultural relationship were. And the other thing is, about the Panchatantra and the spread of the tales of Panchatantra to the Pahlavis and through them to the West. And perhaps also it needs to be emphasized upon that Panchatantra is perhaps the most widely translated text after the Bible. It's quite amazing, not very well known, and how little of Panchatantra we know. Our older texts and illustrations of the Panchatantra are also equally important. Unfortunately, we don't have any illustration known to us so far as old as the Panjikant murals that Suchandra has shown, just given us a glimpse. In any case, those of you who had the great fortune to listen to her lecture, I'm sure would inculcate in your mind some more questions and some more urge to know a little more of these frontiers of our knowledge. Thank you, Suchandra, for your illuminating talk, especially normally in talks of history and other things, illustrations are not so widely used. It's virtually left to our area of art history. But how important these few illustrations that she pointed out, some of these are also new to me and absolutely fabulous. Thank you, Suchandra, and thank you, Anil, for calling me here. I'm very glad that I came here.
Okay.
Ma'am, I am a BA second student. My question is that how does my question is that how does subcutaneous proximity to the bacteria help or damage it, considering we just learned about Indo-Greeks and we know that bacteria was a melting point politically. How does that help or damage this region because of its proximity? Yes. Yes, because it's related to trade and political. It was all about trade and prosperity.
Very good, very good. Thank you very much. A very good question, but not a melting pot. Okay, he has asked that how far the Sogdians' proximity to bacteria helped in whether it has damaged or anything, they helped in the growth of Sogdia, isn't it? Now, from the very beginning, if we look at the political history of this region, we see that this was under the Achaemenids, and then, of course, Alexander, and then Seleucids. And during the time of Seleucids, the governor of this region, then the Greek governor Theodotus, as we call him, so he came, and that time Bactria and Sogdiana was within the same kingdom, so it was the same. Then later on, Sogdians became separate, and Bactria and Sogdia became 2 different kingdoms. Now, when they were together, it was under one political rule, so there was no problem as such. But even when they were separate entities, Trade relations continued, and Sogdians as traders for in the context of the international trading, that happened only later after the Kushanas. So the prehistory of the trade is there, that they had some kind of relation. They were coming by 2nd century CE, 1st century, 2nd century, in the time of the Kushanas. They were there, they were present, but the flourish as a trader happened only in the post-Kushana period. So around the 3rd, 4th, 5th century, and then the nexus with the whole kind of Gansu corridor and going to the China and other things. So therefore, there was not the proximity to Bactria helped only. It was not a hindrance, because Bactria was a region which was very a kind of a place where you have so much to, it gave so much. So the rivers, Damodariya, the Sidra, then there was this Iconium. Iconium was an important area, an important kingdom. So the proximity actually helped. It was not a deterrent. But in the post-Kushan period, the Sogdians flourished as a trading community. Okay? Yeah, sure. No, it's fine.
Good evening, everyone. My question is that this trading system, did it have any link with the Silk Route?
Yeah, very much. The map that I showed, the Sogdian, the names of the Sog in the ancient letters where you have, this is part of the larger Silk Route map. Okay. And why don't you take your seat? Yeah. And the Silk Route network is a very interesting, it's a complex network of a grand route with its capillary routes. So you have lot of, so you start from lowland, from that area, then you are coming that, if you remember the Gansu area, the Hexidor, that corridor, and then you come to the Taklamakan Desert. So one goes up the Taklamakan Desert, other goes below, and then you finally meet at Kashgar. So I have mentioned Tashkurgan. Tashkurgan is very near Kashgar, and Tashkurgan has a tower. It is also considered, like if we go very far back in time, for the time of Pliny, which is around 79 AD CE. So Pliny writes that this here, there is in Tashkurgan, there is a silence tower, and then there are traders who are actually they are silent traders because they come and leave their things. It's a kind of a barter. So from very early days, this Tashkurgan Kashgar region was very much a part of the larger Silk Road trade network, which flourished during the time of the Eastern Roman Empire and even further later. And in when it was the period of the Sogdians, it was actually, there were many oasis townships in these areas. And in these oasis towns, the Sogdians were also there because there was this difficulty of the Hunu, the Huna merchants, Huna traders would come and there was Huna warriors. So it was very much a part of the larger Silk Road. That's why in these merchant letters were actually found from another stone tower by when Sir Orelstein was exploring the Silk Road and these areas. Thank you. No, people won't hear it.
Hello, ma'am. I am Monami. I am a research scholar here. Ma'am, when generally we talk about a trade network or an economic network, we generally associate it with any type of economic transaction, right? It may be coins, it may be bills. So generally here we saw literary evidences from Ponchodantro. We saw some epigraphical evidences. Ma'am, can you please tell me about some, if there are any numismatic evidences or as such like economic transaction or any evidences related to such things?
Sure. Yeah, actually, these letters also give us an idea. If you look and read the letters, I didn't have the time to go through the letters. If you read the letters, this gives us the idea of the economic transaction. It's a very good question because how much it gives a list, that how much amount, quantification, in economic transaction, quantification is very important. So here we have a quantified data which is giving us a list that like 2,000 bales of pepper has to go. So when we look at this and then the amount, the measure and other, then one can actually make an understanding. If you find this book by Etienne de la Vassière, who's the Marchand of the Sogdians, it was the French, but they have translated it. I don't know who has translated, so you can search. So there you will find these references where the transaction networks are good. Beyond that also, there are lots of other Chinese records which talks about the merchants and their activities. So there are a lot of indications of economic transactions in these areas. But here my thrust of the paper was cultural. I was trying to build up the cultural space. So therefore, since it is cultural, I did not bring those data, but it is possible and one can see the Chinese records a lot if you want.
So again, my turn to for this formally thank all of you who have participated, joined online as well as physically present. But before this formal vote of thanks, I have small announcement to make that next month, Professor Claudine Picron has agreed to deliver the lecture in this series. So probably on 17th of August, we will be organizing 11th lecture in this series. So now, first, thanks to Professor Ghosh for her, as I said earlier, illuminating, encouraging, inspiring lecture. And of course, encouraging for all the students, because very few students are also coming up with these kind of topics nowadays. And from core of my heart, I really would like to thank Professor Ashok Das sir, that he attended this lecture. A couple of days ago only, I requested, through WhatsApp, I requested him, I could get him over phone, but still he is here. So I'm really grateful, as well as the whole yeah, sir. So, yeah, she told me that you are not here. So the whole department is grateful that you are here, sir, in front of us. And no, sir. Then, of course, Nupur, the Dr. Preeta, Dr. Santani. I think first time she has attended this lecture, although I have been inviting her from the beginning. And my colleague Shiladi from Bangla department. I think all the colleagues and research scholars, as you all are aware that the examination session is going on. Therefore, we are not getting a large number of students these days because everyone is busy in the semester exams. So all the best and thank you very much, and we'll request all of you to continue supporting us for this effort. And in future also, I request all of you to join this event. Thank you very much. And thank you, my colleague, Dr. Suken, for organizing this properly. Thank you. Thank you.